Weddings are supposed to be a celebration of love, a gathering of family and friends to witness the union of two souls. But for me, my sister Anna's wedding was something else entirely. It was the day she made it clear, in front of hundreds of guests, exactly how little she thought of me. The reception was in full swing, a grand affair in a sprawling vineyard estate. Laughter and music filled the air, and the clinking of champagne glasses blended with the distant hum of conversation. I lingered near the back of the venue, nursing a drink, trying not to feel out of place. Anna had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our family. She was beautiful, successful, and charming, everything our parents had ever wanted in a daughter. And then there was me, the younger brother who had stumbled through life, never quite meeting expectations. I thought I had come to terms with that. But I wasn't prepared for what happened when Anna took the microphone for a toast. She was glowing in her wedding dress, standing beside her new husband, David. "I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who made this day so special," she said, smiling at the crowd. "My wonderful bridesmaids, my incredible parents, and of course, my husband, who is truly the best man I've ever known." There was a pause, just long enough to be noticeable. "Well," she added, her eyes flicking to me, "certainly better than some men." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the guests. My stomach twisted. It was subtle enough that some people might not have noticed, but I knew exactly what she was doing. It was another reminder of my failures, another way to make sure I stayed in my place. I clenched my jaw, willing myself to stay composed. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. But then, before I could slip away unnoticed, something unexpected happened. David, my sister's new husband, set down his champagne glass and walked straight toward me. Before I could say a word, he pulled me into a tight hug. I heard a sharp intake of breath from Anna. She had no idea. No idea that David and I had been best friends since childhood. The hug lasted only a second, but in that moment, I could feel the weight of it. David wasn't just offering me comfort, he was making a statement. I patted his back and pulled away, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. He grinned at me, the same easygoing smile I had known since we were kids. Anna's expression, however, was frozen in shock. Her perfectly composed wedding day facade had cracked, if only for an instant. "You two know each other?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. David chuckled, shaking his head as if the very idea was ridiculous. "Know each other? Anna, your brother and I practically grew up together." A murmur passed through the nearby guests. People were starting to take interest, their eyes flicking between the three of us. I didn't say anything. I wanted to see how Anna would handle this. She forced a smile, but I could see the way her grip tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. "That's interesting," she said slowly. "I guess I never realized you two were so close." I finally spoke, my voice calm but firm. "You never asked." A flicker of something crossed her face, annoyance, perhaps, or guilt, though she would never admit to the latter. David laughed, completely unaware, or pretending to be, of the tension. "Man, I can't believe this never came up. We used to get into so much trouble together. Remember that time we snuck into the old drive-in and nearly got caught?" I nodded, smiling at the memory. "And we had to hide in the back of some stranger's truck for half an hour." David laughed harder, shaking his head. "Good times, man." Anna's smile was thin now, barely holding. "So, you two are friends?" David turned to her, his expression suddenly more serious. "Not just friends. He's like a brother to me." The words hit her like a slap. I could almost see the calculations running through her mind. For years, she had built this image of me, someone unworthy, someone beneath her. But here was her husband, the man she had chosen to spend her life with, openly declaring that he valued me. Anna had always wanted to keep me at a distance, but now? Now I was part of her world in a way she hadn't expected. And she hated that. For the first time in years, I had the upper hand. Anna was never one to let emotions slip easily, but I could see the tension in her posture, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She had built a perfect wedding, a perfect image, and suddenly, something was out of her control. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had spent so much time dismissing me that she never even bothered to ask who I was outside of being her little brother. David, oblivious to the silent battle happening between us, clapped me on the back. "Man, I should have told you sooner," he said, shaking his head. "I had no idea Anna and you weren't close." That was a nice way of putting it. "We're family," Anna said quickly, as if that settled it. David chuckled. "Yeah, but family doesn't always mean close, right? I mean, you never even mentioned your brother much. I always thought he lived out of state or something." Anna's fingers tightened around her champagne glass, her knuckles turning white. I watched her carefully. She wasn't just annoyed, she was unraveling. I could almost hear the thoughts running through her mind. This was her big day. The day where she was supposed to shine. And now, instead of being the perfect bride, she was standing in front of a crowd that was beginning to notice the cracks in the picture she had painted. Before she could recover, David turned back to me. "We need to catch up properly. You free for a beer sometime next week?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." Anna let out a small, forced laugh. "Wow, David, you act like you're just meeting him for the first time." David grinned. "No, I just didn't realize I was marrying into a family with my best friend already in it." Her jaw clenched. I had never seen her at a loss for words before. She had spent years trying to push me aside, but now she was trapped. There was no way to dismiss me anymore, not without creating a scene on her wedding day. So, she did what she always did when she was losing. She smiled. "Well," she said, lifting her champagne glass, "I guess it's nice that you two have history." David raised his own glass, completely unaware of the storm brewing beside him. I lifted mine too, watching my sister carefully. "Oh, Anna," I thought to myself, "you have no idea just how much history we have." Because there was something she didn't know. Something that would change everything. Anna was a master at regaining control of a situation, and I could see her mind working, trying to reassert herself. She let out a light laugh, the kind that felt rehearsed. "Well, I suppose this is a pleasant surprise," she said, slipping her arm through David's as if to remind both of us that he belonged to her now. David, oblivious, simply smiled and kissed her temple. But I knew my sister. She wasn't the type to let things go. As the reception continued, I found a quiet corner on the balcony, needing a moment to process everything. The sun was setting over the vineyard, casting a golden glow over the rows of grapevines. It should have been peaceful, but my mind was racing. I never planned on making waves at this wedding. I had intended to come, be polite, and leave unnoticed. But then Anna had taken the mic and made it clear how she saw me, less than. And now? Now she had to face the fact that I wasn't going anywhere. The sound of heels clicking on stone made me exhale sharply. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. Anna stepped up beside me, her expression unreadable. "You've been awfully quiet," she said, her voice smooth but edged with something sharp. I shrugged, taking a sip of my drink. "Didn't have much to say." She folded her arms, watching me carefully. "How long have you known?" I turned to face her fully. "Known what?" "David." Her voice lowered. "How long have you known it was him?" I tilted my head slightly, feigning innocence. "You mean how long have I known my best friend was the man you were marrying?" "Since the moment you sent the invitation." She inhaled sharply, and for the first time all night, I saw something rare, uncertainty. You didn't say anything, she accused. I smiled, slow and deliberate. And you never asked. Her nostrils flared, just the slightest bit. If you thought this would bother me. I didn't think anything, I interrupted. I just let things happen. She let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. You always do this. You always act like you're above everything, like nothing touches you. I leaned against the balcony railing. And you always act like you're untouchable. We stared at each other, years of unspoken resentment simmering between us. Finally, she scoffed. You think this changes anything? I shrugged. I think it already has. And deep down, I knew the real truth. Because Anna didn't just dislike me. She feared me. Because if there was one person in this world who knew who she really was beneath the perfect image, it was me. And if David ever found out? Well, that was a conversation for another day. Anna's mask didn't slip often, but I had seen it crack. And tonight, I had pried it open just a little more. She stood beside me on the balcony, fingers curled too tightly around the railing, jaw set in defiance. But behind her carefully composed face, I saw something deeper. Worry. What exactly do you think you know? She asked, her voice low, controlled. I let the question hang between us, watching the tension coil in her shoulders. She was always like this, always needing to be the one in control, the one with the power. But she had underestimated me. She always had. So I just smiled. I know enough. Anna exhaled sharply. You're being cryptic on purpose. And you're pretending you're not worried. Her glare could have cut through glass. You don't have anything on me, she said finally. You never have. I didn't respond right away. I wanted her to sit in that uncertainty, to let her own mind work against her. Because the truth was, I wasn't the only one at this wedding who knew something. Somewhere in this crowd, someone else did too. And she had no idea. The distant chime of silverware against champagne flutes broke the tension. Inside the reception hall, guests were gathered near the dance floor, calling for the newlyweds' first dance. David appeared in the doorway, smiling warmly when he spotted us. There you two are. Come on, Anna. They're waiting. She turned toward him, and in an instant, her expression shifted. The tension melted away, replaced with the effortless, charming smile she wore so well. Of course, she said sweetly, glancing back at me for only a moment before slipping past. David lingered behind as she walked inside, watching her fondly before turning back to me. I can't believe we never put this together, he said with a laugh. You and Anna being siblings. Crazy, right? I gave him a tight smile. Yeah. Crazy. David patted my shoulder. Hey, don't be a stranger. I want us to catch up properly soon. I nodded. We will. He grinned, giving me one last friendly slap on the back before heading inside to his bride. I stayed behind for a moment longer, letting the night air cool my skin. Anna thought she had everything under control. She thought she had buried every secret, locked every door. But tonight, someone else had the key. And before this wedding was over, she was going to find out exactly how much control she had already lost. From the balcony, I watched as David led Anna to the center of the dance floor. The guests gathered around, their faces glowing with admiration as the newlyweds prepared for their first dance. Soft music floated through the air, and for a moment, it was picture perfect. Anna smiled up at David, every inch the radiant bride, and he gazed at her like she was the only person in the world. But I knew better. Because I had just seen what no one else had, the way Anna tensed before taking his hand, the way her fingers curled just a little too tight around his. She wasn't relaxed. She wasn't in control. And she knew it. I stepped inside the hall, blending into the crowd as they swayed together. It was a beautiful moment, the kind people would remember. But soon, this wedding would be remembered for something else entirely. From the corner of my eye, I saw a movement near the back of the room. A guest who hadn't been there before. My stomach tightened. I had wondered if he would come. There, standing near the entrance, was Mark. And Anna still hadn't seen him. Mark wasn't just any guest. He was her secret. The one she thought would never come to light. He stood with a drink in his hand, watching the dance unfold with a quiet intensity. He was dressed well, blending in easily, but there was something unmistakable about his presence. He wasn't here for the wedding. He was here for her. And if he had decided to show up, it could only mean one thing. He wasn't willing to be a secret anymore. The dance continued, and I could feel the moment stretching, a fragile thread about to snap. Anna laughed at something David whispered, but her eyes flickered toward the crowd, scanning, searching. And then she saw him. Her smile froze. For the briefest second, she hesitated in David's arms. But that second was enough. Because Mark raised his glass to her. A slow, deliberate motion. A silent promise that this night was far from over. And from across the room, I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, my sister was about to learn what it felt like to be powerless. Anna had always been good at hiding things. Growing up, she could lie with such ease that even our parents would second-guess themselves. She was an expert at bending the truth until it worked in her favor, always making sure she came out looking perfect. But she wasn't prepared for tonight. Because Mark wasn't supposed to be here. I had met Mark 2 years ago, completely by accident. I had been at a cafe near my office when I spotted Anna across the street. She was laughing, tucking her hair behind her ear, leaning a little too close to the man beside her. That man wasn't David. At first, I thought maybe it was just a friendly conversation. But then I saw the way he looked at her. And more importantly, the way she looked back. Intrigued, I had followed them, just far enough to confirm what I already suspected. Anna had a secret. For months, I kept it to myself, unsure of what to do with the information. David had been my best friend since childhood, but Anna was my sister. Exposing her would mean destroying her perfect world. I told myself it wasn't my place to get involved. But then, when the wedding invitations went out, I had received a message from an unknown number. That was when I knew the truth. She had been stringing Mark along, making promises she never intended to keep. Maybe she told him she would leave David. Maybe she told him he was different. But in the end, she chose the life that looked best on paper. Mark hadn't taken it well. And now, he was here. The first dance ended, and the room erupted into applause. David pulled Anna into a deep kiss, but I could see the stiffness in her movements. Her eyes darted back toward Mark, a silent plea for him to disappear. But he didn't. Instead, he took a step forward, weaving through the crowd, closing the distance between them. Anna stiffened. David, still beaming, turned to shake hands with guests, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. I moved closer, not wanting to miss a second of it. Mark reached them just as Anna turned away, trying to escape into the crowd. But he wasn't letting her go that easily. "Anna," he said, his voice quiet but firm. She froze. Slowly, she turned, her face carefully neutral. "I think you're mistaken," she said smoothly. "Have we met?" Mark let out a small, bitter laugh. "That's cute. I see you're still good at pretending." My pulse quickened. David finally noticed the exchange, his brow furrowing as he glanced between them. "Hey, is everything okay?" Anna's fingers curled into fists at her sides, her mind no doubt racing for a way out. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Mark tilted his head, studying her. "You're really going to act like you don't know me?" David's confusion deepened. Wait, do you too? Anna let out a small laugh, but I could hear the strain beneath it. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mark's expression hardened. A misunderstanding, he repeated. Is that what you call 2 years of sneaking around behind his back? The room went silent. A few guests turned, their conversations dying as they realized something was happening. David blinked, a slow, dawning confusion washing over him. What? Anna's face drained of color. Mark. But he wasn't done. You told me I was the one, he continued, his voice rising. You told me this was just for appearances, that you'd end it before the wedding. A murmur spread through the crowd. People were watching now, whispers floating through the air. David took a step back, his expression unreadable. Anna, what is he talking about? Anna reached for his arm, her voice desperate. David, please. Mark wasn't having it. She's been lying to you, he said bluntly. For years. She played us both. David's face hardened. Is this true? Anna swallowed. I can explain. He pulled his arm away. No. Just answer the question. Is it true? Silence. And in that silence, everything she had built crumbled. The perfect wedding. The perfect image. The perfect lie. I had never seen my sister speechless before. But there she was, standing in the wreckage of her own making, with nothing left to say. And I had never felt so satisfied. The silence in the reception hall was suffocating. Hundreds of eyes were on Anna, waiting, demanding, an answer. But for the first time in her life, words failed her. David's face had gone pale, his hands clenched at his sides. He looked at her like she was a stranger. Mark stood tall, his expression a mix of anger and satisfaction. He had held on to this truth for so long, waiting for his moment. And now that it had arrived, he had no intention of walking away without consequences. I stood back, watching, waiting. Anna exhaled shakily, forcing a tight smile. David, let's talk about this privately. David shook his head. No, his voice was quiet but firm. No more secrets. She flinched. Mark crossed his arms. That's funny, he said, his voice laced with venom. Because secrets were all we had, weren't they, Anna? The whispers spread faster now, rippling through the room. Some guests looked horrified, others intrigued. The wedding photographer, sensing something monumental, slowly lowered his camera. And then someone muttered it. One word. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Affair. David inhaled sharply, his expression twisting with realization. His whole body tensed, like he had just been punched. My God. His voice cracked. It's true, isn't it? Anna shook her head furiously. David, please, You cheated on me? His voice rose, raw and disbelieving. People gasped. The murmur turned into outright conversation. Anna's eyes darted around wildly, searching for an escape. But there was none. Her perfect wedding had become a public trial. And she was guilty. David let out a hollow laugh, running a hand through his hair. This whole time? Mark scoffed. She had me thinking she'd leave you eventually. He turned to her, shaking his head. You lied to both of us. Anna's breathing grew rapid. David, I love you. I chose you. David looked sick. You chose me? His voice was bitter. Like I was an option. I had never seen David like this before. He was always the steady one, the optimist. But now, his heart was breaking in front of everyone. He stepped back, his face unreadable. Then, he turned toward the crowd. Enjoy the party, everyone, he said bitterly. Because the wedding's over. And with that, he pulled off his wedding band and dropped it onto the floor. The small clink of metal against tile echoed through the silent room. Anna gasped. No, David, wait. But he was already walking away. Anna turned frantically toward me, as if I could help her. Her voice was shaking. You knew, didn't you? I met her gaze, calm and steady. I knew. She let out a strangled breath, realization sinking in. You let this happen. I tilted my head. You did this. Her lips trembled. I had never seen her look so lost. And as she stood there, abandoned, humiliated, powerless, I knew one thing for sure. Anna had spent her whole life controlling the narrative. But tonight? Tonight, the truth had finally caught up to her. Anna didn't chase after David. Maybe she wanted to, but the weight of all those eyes stopped her. Everyone had seen the moment her life shattered. There was no fixing it now. The music had stopped. The laughter, the celebration, gone. Guests shifted uncomfortably, murmuring among themselves. Some looked away, pretending not to be witnesses to the wreckage. Others stared outright, drinking in the drama like it was part of the evening's entertainment. Mark, satisfied that he had said his piece, exhaled and stepped back. Guess I'll see myself out, he muttered, tossing one last glance at Anna. Good luck explaining this one. Then he turned and walked out of the reception hall. I half expected Anna to follow him, but she didn't move. She just stood there, gripping the fabric of her dress, eyes unfocused. Finally, I stepped closer. You should go, I said quietly. Her head snapped up, eyes burning. You enjoyed this, didn't you? I held her gaze. I didn't plan it, Anna. But I won't pretend to be sorry. Her lips parted like she wanted to scream at me, blame me, make me the villain in this. But there was nothing left to say. Without another word, she turned on her heel and hurried away, pushing through the crowd, her white dress trailing behind her like a ghost of the perfect life she had just lost. I watched her go, exhaling slowly. And then, when I was sure she was gone, I smiled. Anna didn't chase after David. She didn't have to. The damage was done. The reception hall was chaos, guests whispering, some awkwardly slipping out, others staring at Anna like she was a spectacle. Mark, satisfied, downed the rest of his drink and walked out without another word. I stayed where I was, watching my sister. For years, she had looked down on me. Treated me like I was insignificant. But now? Now she stood alone in the ruins of her perfect life. And for the first time, she had no one left to blame but herself.